Friends, we are going to begin the funeral service for Mrs. Zinaida Kogan. If you have a cell phone, I'd ask you kindly to place it in silent mode or turn it completely off at this time. I'd also like to welcome everybody via live stream on behalf of the family. Thank you for attending as well. Services will be conducted by Rabbi Michael Tillman. He's going to start with the ancient tradition of cutting of the kriya. So if we could have the family members with the ribbons, please rise. Oh, never mind yet.
Orders do not rise and do not respond to greetings. Friends, before we begin, as Peggy mentioned, we shall perform the kriya, a very ancient ritual which dates back to the biblical period of our history. In the text of the Tanakh, of the Hebrew Bible, we often find that whenever people receive sad news, including those that are passing on a loved one, they will tear their clothes and put a dust upon their head as a sign of mourning. And the custom of renting our garment on the occasion of the passing of a loved one we retained in our community to this day. Therefore, at this time, I shall tear the ribbons given to the immediate family of the deceased. Blessed be Lord of God, who of the universe judge. Amen. A very long time ago, to be more precise, more than 25 years ago, when I was still a young man studying in the Rabbinical Academy, I had a teacher. He was an historian, a really fascinating man. His name was Dr. Jacob Rader Marcus. Now, Dr. Marcus wrote the very first book on the history of the American Jews. So he single-handedly found the entire field of the historical studies. So a very prominent scholar. And he lived a long life. He lived to be almost 100 years of age, fell a couple of weeks short of that remarkable date. So I was the last class that he taught. He was 98 and a half at the time, but very, very sharp, clear mind. So one time in our class, we were discussing funerals. And Dr. Marcus told me something that I found to be astounding at that moment, at that time. He was from West Virginia, so he had this peculiar accent. He said, "Michael, you better believe it. 5 minutes got to be enough to say everything important about anybody." Now, I was young, and like many young people, I perceived death rather dramatically. So I couldn't believe what I just heard. 5 minutes? What are you talking about, 5 minutes? About life. But when I started working, practicing as a rabbi, I realized that the old man knew what he was talking about. So 5 years after that conversation, I was already here in Skokie, right by Skokie Swift. I was sitting in the house of the family. They lost their father, 2 sons, and we were discussing the funeral, and I quoted my teacher to one of the sons. And he replied to me, he said, "But Rabbi, this is so sad." I said, "What's so sad?" "Well, the whole life in 5 minutes. And I replied without even thinking, it just came out by itself. I said, "Okay, what good is a book if you cannot tell me in 5 minutes what the book is about? You read the book, you should be able to tell me in 5 minutes what that book is about." Now, life is a book. Life is a book. Like any book, it has the beginning. Like any book, it has the ending. And in between, we have everything. We have good things, we have bad things, we have triumphs, we have challenges, we have everything. And when we gather together to celebrate life of those people whom we lost, it is not only about the pain of loss, which we undoubtedly all feel today, and we're here to support Zina's family. We're here to support all of you, my dear friends. But much more importantly, it is about that book that Zina is leaving for us as her legacy. And that is not the reason to be sad. That is not the reason to be mournful. That is the reason to rejoice and to be proud. Because she wrote a wonderful book of life, of her life, for all of us. Why? Well, we'll discuss why. I'll talk about it. Jenny will talk about it. Marie will talk about it. I know Alina will talk about it. We'll reflect on that today. But to sum it up, one thing that I would like to mention about Zina's book is that in that book, every page, every sentence, every letter counts. Because, and I'm quoting her daughters, she didn't waste a single moment granted to her by the Almighty One in this world. She never postponed to have life experiences. She never postponed to perform good deeds. She never postponed to live, never postponed to love. She always aspired to make every day, every hour, every minute count, make it meaningful. And that is the way to live, my dear friends. Because we should all understand we're not here forever. Zina always knew that. And that's how she lived. How do we write that book of life? King Solomon wrote a very elegant, yet very simple, in my opinion, yet poetic reflection about 3,000 years ago in the book that is attributed to him, the book of Ecclesiastes. Kohelet is called in Hebrew. And in chapter 3, he discusses exactly that. There is a time to be born, there is a time to die, and in between, there is everything. Time for peace, time for war, time for love, time for hate, everything. And it is a duty of every person, of every human being, to make each experience count, be they good ones or bad ones, pleasant ones or painful ones. They must be meaningful. This is our mission, and this is how we write our book of life. The words of King Solomon. לכל זמן ועת לכל חפץ תחת השמיים, עת לרדת ועת למות, עת לטעת ועת לקור נטוע, עת לפרוץ ועת למנוד, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת צפות ועת ריקוד, עת להשליך אבנים ועת כנוס אבנים, עת לחבוק ועת לרחוק מחבק, עת לבקש ועת לאבד, עת לשמור ועת להשליך, עת לקרוא ועת לתפור, עת לחשות ועת לדבר. For everything there is a season and a time for every experience under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. It is a time to speak. It is a time to reflect on the book that Zina has written. Now, Zina arrived in this world. Well, I know the year, I wrote it down, but I don't think we're going to discuss that she was a lady. So we're not going to talk about the age, right? No, I'm not going to do that. I always say women do not age and men never grow up. Right, Bill? Yeah. You know that, Masha. You know, Marie. You know. Be it as it may, Zina was born in a wonderful city of Moscow. I'm saying this with pride because I was born in that same city as well, just a couple of years later than Zina. And she grew up in the center of the city, in one of the most famous streets of the city, Tverskoy Boulevard, Tver Boulevard. In Moscow, well, those of you who are from Moscow know what I'm talking about. If you're not, well, Bill knows what I'm talking about. In Moscow, they have so-called boulevard ring, Bulvarное кольцо. So the most famous of those boulevards is Tverskoy Boulevard, and that's where Zina's childhood was spent. Now, she was a very brilliant, very gifted person, and I'm saying that because she actually has 2 degrees, not 1, but 2. And in fact, they also hardly have anything to do with one another. Her initial training was an architect, and we were discussing prior to the service, she must have finished Marchi, because that was the only the only available education in the field of architecture in Moscow. MARHI is Moskovsky Architectural Institute, Moscow Institute for Architecture. But be it as it may, she became an architect, and then once she married Rafa, Allah Shalom, may his memory be a blessing, and they were blessed with the daughters. She was, well, a stay-home mom, a homemaker, took care of her children, and then once the girls were old enough to take care of themselves, really, they were in school, they were almost adults, even though to our mothers were never adults, really, never, ever, but technically they were almost adults, and she decided that she wants something more enjoyable and something more meaningful. And she went ahead, and being a mother of 2 children, she applied for the МГПИ имени Ленина, Moskovsky Государственный Педагогический институт имени Ленина, which is basically a teacher's college, but it was a teacher's college with a very in-depth training. They trained very highly qualified teachers, and she got a degree as the elementary school teacher, as учительница начальных классов, and taught at one and the same school, I think, in Moscow. Children loved her, parents loved her. It really was Zina's calling. She found herself in her professional career in this life. And I also must stress that when she moved to the United States with Rafa, 1990, I think it was, correct? 1990 they moved here, yeah. So her skills, her talent were very helpful, because there was a demand, still is really, many families who need a teacher, an instructor, a nanny, if you will, for their children. And her being an elementary school teacher, and a very accomplished one for that matter, she worked with many families here stateside, helping them raise their kids. And I would like to stress that those families all truly adored her and loved what she did for them, because for her, for Zina, it wasn't just a job, a profession, because being a teacher is not only about conveying knowledge, conveying information. It is about taking care of young people, about conveying values to young people. This is what it's all about. Now, Zina was the woman who loved life. She loved life wholeheartedly. It was all about life. And that is why, I repeat, I said that she has written a beautiful book of life, a very inspiring one for that matter. I'm far from suggesting that her life was always easy. Life is never easy. There's no such thing as an easy life. But it's all about the meaning. It's all about that us making our experiences meaningful in big things and in small things. And Zina was a person who knew how to make the big things matter, how to make the small things matter, and that is why her life was so accomplished and so great. Now, when the family moved to the United States in 1990, and I must stress that Bill and Marie were very instrumental in that, because they made it here much earlier than the rest of the family did. And Rafa and Zina came to the United States in 1990, and that became their home. Here in the States, she finally got to enjoy seeing the beauty of the world. The reason I'm mentioning that, my friends, is because for the people in the Soviet Union, the doors to traveling, at least to traveling abroad, were pretty much closed. It was a non-existent. It was an opportunity that never existed. So when we found freedom of movement, freedom to travel here, we all enjoyed it, and so did Zina. So while Rafa was still around, they traveled extensively. They went on cruises. They went to Los Angeles, to Vegas. With Vitya, they also traveled quite a bit. So it was truly a beautiful, wonderful time. She loved theater. She loved culture in all of its manifestations. She loved opera. She truly was an intelligent and a woman of high culture and a very sublime taste. And as far as her taste is concerned, one aspect I would like to stress is how elegantly Zina always dressed. She had style. She always did. She was a lady's lady, if you will. Because to her, she was an old school woman, which means that she always had to look the part, to look like a lady, and she always did. And dressing sharp, dressing beautifully was very important to her, and she never failed to follow that rule. Now, needless to say, I mentioned the arts, I mentioned travel, I mentioned all these good things, but one thing that I did not mention yet is yet another art, a sublime art of culinary. And she was a wonderful cook too. Those of you who would visit her always knew that she would feed you well. Leaving hungry was not an option. But that's a typical Moscow, Russian-speaking lady, hospitality. And moreover, I also would like to say that both Jenny and Masha, Jenny and Marie, shared with me yesterday that they learned cooking from Zina. She taught them that. And I could go on and on about cooking abilities, but I would like to highlight two things. Since I happen to be a big fan of the Georgian cuisine, Georgian, not the state of Georgia, I mean Georgia that is in Kafkas Mountains. So she cooked Georgian food, satsivi, chachakhbili, and other wonderful things. I'm already hungry. And her signature dish was blini s икрой. Blinchiki with caviar. That was something that everybody loved and enjoyed in the family. So these were, you may say, oh, these are small things, these are small details of big life. Well, yes, but my friends, the beauty of life, the fabric of life consists of those small little details that make up for the meaning and the beauty of our sojourn in this world. Now to big things. Well, Zina defined her mission in life through one word. Yes, she had a career as a teacher and previously also a little bit as an architect, yes. She enjoyed life in many its manifestations, yes. She knew how to have a good time and how to rejoice in the beauty of the world. But the core of her being was mishpocha, family. This is what truly mattered to her, and she devoted all of her life to loving her family, caring for her family. And, well, the family list is pretty big. It's pretty extensive, but I will go over it. She had two sisters who were substantially older than her. There was like 10 years gap, I think, between each sister. So Frida was the eldest sister, may memory be a blessing. And she also had a sister who is no longer with us as well. She lived in Moscow, Valia, may memory be a blessing. And her children, Alena and Sasha, and she loved them very much, her niece and nephew. I already mentioned her husband, Rafa. They were together for more than 50 years. And I can go on and on about that she was a loving wife, she was a caring wife. They are words. But I think in this particular case, it's really about just one fact that will tell you how she felt about Rafa and how much she loved Rafa. She took care of him for the 17 years. Had a stroke. Right? Rafa suffered a stroke, and for the last 17 years of his life, he was suffering from the consequences of the stroke. He was handicapped. Now think about this 17 years. If this is not an act of heroism in real life, I don't know what is. And I know what I'm talking about because in my situation, my father took care of my mother for 17 years after the stroke. I know how hard it is. I know how frustrating it is. And stroke patients, it's not an easy ride, trust me, my friends. She took care of Rafa for 17 years prior to his passing. I don't think I need to say any more words about her love for Rafa. I also would like to take this opportunity and acknowledge a wonderful man, Витя. Витя, дай Бог вам душевных сил и доброго здравия. They were together for the last 12 years of Zina's life. И я хочу особо подчеркнуть, что Зина и Витя были прекрасной парой, и их семьи сблизились, и жили очень дружно. Так что, видите, всей вашей семье душевных сил и доброго здравия. I would like to acknowledge Victor, her wonderful life companion of the last 12 years, and his entire family, who became very close with Zina's family as well. Her wonderful daughters, Maria and Jenny, Masha and Zhenya. Well, they will speak for themselves, so I'm not going to dwell at length on that. But one thing I'd like to say is that it is a mission of every parent to raise a good kid. When our children grow up and they're successful in their careers, we are rightfully proud. But my mission is only complete when the moment arrives and I say to myself, my daughter grew up to be a good person. That's when I'm done. And Zina was rightfully proud of her daughters, and she loved them very much. Mary is married to Bill, Jen is married to Sasha, and both of them were dear to Zina's heart. And now I'm getting to the long part of the list. I hope I will not get lost or confused because it's a long list, but all the same. So her wonderful grandchildren, Julie, Patrick, Charlie, Roman, and Alina. And now these wonderful individuals have their own life companions. So Julie has Joe, Patrick has Sarah, Charlie has Jim, and Alina just got married to Phil, I think a year and a half ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. And great-grandchildren. She was truly blessed. She lived to see 3 younger generations of her family. And her great-grandchildren are Max, Phoebe, Harrison, Oscar, Quincy, Iggy, Mitchell, Clark, Sawyer, Gwen. Did I get them all? I got them all. Wow. I'm so proud of myself. But my friends, this is truly beautiful. She was a matriarch of the family because the tree, her family tree, branches out so wide. And that in itself is a blessing. At this time, my friends, we shall continue, reflect on Zina's Book of Life through thoughts and reminiscences of her loved ones. As I promised, Marie will start out this part and share her thoughts about her mom.
This is day 3 that I'm on the planet without Mom. And it is hard, even though you know it was coming. Mom was a good friend. You could talk to her about anything. She was wise. I remember many years ago, I lamented to her that I didn't know what to do about a situation that I shared with her. And Mom said, don't do anything. Keep thinking. You'll know what to do when the time is right. I've been thinking about it all my life. It's a great advice. Mom was very kind, open-minded. She was a true humanist, accepting of people and our different ways. Mom had a lot of friends and always welcomed our friends. I brought several of my Wisconsin friends to visit Mom, and to today, they remember her table full of endless, delectable dishes with the Russian TV music blasting in the background. She liked to have a good time and was always excited about a good party, and a strong pink drink was a must at those parties. And that's what we'll do today. We'll celebrate her life. Rest in peace, Mom. Thank you.
And at this time, I'm pleased to invite Jenny, to share her thoughts about Zina.
I'm too short. I wanted to thank everybody who joined us now here in person, and I know we have a live stream for those who couldn't join us in person, but I know you're all with us and you support us. The amount of calls and messages and flowers we received in the last 3 difficult days it's indescribable. And I promise not to cry. I put my mascara on as my mom would like me to. It will hold me from crying. But what I really wanted to talk about, Mom's incredible ability to be happy with very little things in life. She would call us in the middle of the day. I would be at work, busy. She would interrupt, knowing not to call me unless it's an emergency, and tell me that Victor and Mom won a laundry detergent playing bingo in the building. It was like the highlight of her day. She was happy with everything. As hard as the life came to her at times, she always looked at life as a glass half full and would able to find for her and our dad and Victor at later life happiness. And she passed it all on all of us. She loved all of us. And I know it was mentioned several times that she had 2 daughters, but honestly, she had 4 children because Bill, my brother-in-law, and Sasha, my husband, were always her sons. They treated her as their mom, and she loved them sometimes even more than us all her life. And she looked up to them and loved them dearly. So they were her children as us. And the last thing I wanted to say, she was very lucky in love. She used to win a lot of lotteries, and when they would go to Vegas playing penny slot machines or something, Mom would always win. So I encourage you all, Mom's numbers were 5 for the month she was born, 16 the day, 1934 her birthday. Put those numbers in your lottery ticket and let you all be as lucky as our mom was. Thank you.
Thank you, Zhenya. And now it's time for the grandchildren to speak, and Alina will share her thoughts about the grandma.
Okay. So I have my notes on my phone. I promise I'm not one of those millennials that just always needs their phone with them. So, as my mom said, I also just want to thank everyone for being here, those in person and those watching on the live stream. I know it really means a lot to our family to have you all here to help us celebrate the life of this wonderful woman that I was lucky to call my grandma, my babushka. She was truly one of a kind. What I always admired about her so much was her zest for life and her ability not only to find happiness in everyday things, but to create it for herself and for everyone around her. She would always use her fancy dishes at home and put out the best delicacies for meals. She wasn't one to save things for a special occasion, because to her, just being here and being together was a special occasion. Her motto was, you have to make it special for yourself, and she always did. Whether it was a new outfit that she was excited about, or a new restaurant she tried the other day, or a dish that she cooked herself, the way that she was able to appreciate these little things and truly enjoy them was just incredible. And you could tell just by the way she described them how excited she was. So as the grandchild that lived the closest, I was usually the one that would drive babushka back and forth to various family functions. And I always loved watching her walk to the car, and then she would stop to pose. I know you can't really see me, but I'm sure you can imagine Grandma posing. And she would say, "Nu, как тебе твоя бабушка?" which translates, "So, what do you think of your grandma?" And then, of course, there would be a pause for compliments, so we could all tell her how fantastic she looked. I remember one time Phil and I were driving her and Victor in the car, and Phil asked me, what are they talking about back there? And I said, Phil, I can sum it up in one word: food. They were talking about what they ate earlier in the day, what they were planning on eating at my parents' house, what she was going to cook tomorrow, and so on. And the answer was almost always food. And I think that's largely because she equated food with family and friends and socializing. And she took such joy in cooking for others and feeding others. It was impossible not to get just as excited as she was. I think one of the best ways we can continue to honor Babushka is by taking a page from her book and really living life to the fullest, enjoying every day and creating our own happiness in the little things. So thank you, Babulia, for teaching me your outlook. It's something that will always be a part of me. I love you, and I will always continue to celebrate you.
Let us honor Zina's memory with a moment of silence. Please rise, and the memorial prayer will follow. אל מלא רחמים שוכם במרומים. עמצה מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכנה. במעלות קדושים עוטרים כזער הרקים מזכירים. את נשמת זינאידה שהלכה לעולמה. בעל הרחמים יסתרג בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. וצור בצור החיים מת נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה. ותנוח בשלום על משכבה. ונאמר אמן. God, full of mercy, who dwells in the heights, provide a sure rest upon the divine presence's wings, within the range of the holy, pure, and glorious, who shine and resemble the skies, to the soul of our beloved Zina. The Master of mercy will protect her forever, and will bind your soul in the bond of everlasting life. God is your inheritance. May she rest in peace. Let us all say, Amen.
This does conclude the service here in the chapel. The interment will take place on the cemetery grounds. We will follow in procession to the graveside. Immediately following the burial, the family would like to invite everyone to return to the Zhivago restaurant, which is right across the main entrance to the cemetery here, 9925 Grosse Pointe Road in Skokie. At this time, the gentlemen who have been asked to serve as pallbearers, if you could please step forward.